out loud so I didn't forget. So folks know I'm recording this. We share this on our YouTube channel for the month or so afterward. It's a great opportunity for all of you then to share this out with staff members or other folks who might want to see this but weren't able to be here today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Amanda for the rest of our time together.
All right, so I'm just going to share my screen quickly here so you guys can all see what I'm working with. All right. Okay, perfect. So, good morning, everybody. Hold on here. There we go. All right. Good morning, everybody. My name, as Brian mentioned, is Amanda Sargent. I work in outpatient therapy at Hiawatha Valley Mental Health Center here in Winona. And I'm here to talk to you today about the importance of balancing self-care and promoting overall wellness in the workplace. Now, I put quotation marks around the word workplace because I want to be considerate of all of those of you that are currently working from home and kind of adapting your home work environments to do the same thing, essentially. But much of the information that I'm going to share here today is rather fluid, and it can be adapted to whatever environment that you might find yourself in currently. In essence, we're really going to tune into how to take care of ourselves today, like just blanket statement. As parents, caretakers, and employees, it can be exceptionally hard to balance the mental load at any point in our lives, but especially now during this pandemic that seems to have gone on forever. Because there's so much to address and take care of on a daily basis, our mental health often gets put on the back burner. So our goal here today is to address some of these issues, start a conversation about our experiences with these concerns, and then ultimately identify ways that we can actively prevent them. So before I really jump into things, I wanted to take a moment to address some housekeeping items. After I finish the presentation, I'll be accepting questions in the little chat area. Please hold your questions until then, as I might answer them throughout the presentation. There's pieces of this that sometimes kind of feel a little choppy at times. So I recommend taking some brief notes as well so that you can actually apply some of this information to your own life after this presentation. And then finally, if it brings any discomfort for you or you experience a crisis, the result of something we talk about, please call this number on your screen to connect with a professional about this. All right, so first I'm going to give a little background on myself and my qualifications, as well as some background on why mental health and self-care matter, which I'm sure that you guys already have kind of an inclination. We're going to discuss the different types of self-care and how they work together to nurture ourselves, including setting boundaries between work and home. Particularly, we'll examine how managing this mental load can really be a full-time job in itself and identify ways to lighten the burden it can have. I'll also touch briefly on managing this while working or teaching from home, as I know that some of you might be parents or have multiple responsibilities that you're catering to at this time. We'll also identify some pressure points or stressors that impact our functioning, and then how to address the barriers that we face when trying to implement these self-care practices, as well as how to balance multiple roles at once. We've also added in some additional resources and supports available to you just so you can get further support past this presentation if anything strikes a chord with you. All right, so after this presentation, my hope is that you'll be able to kind of examine your own work-life balance and mental load, and then create some active plans to address some of those concerns, make things a little easier for you. Develop new ideas for self-care to easily implement into your daily life around already structured schedules and things that aren't going to take too much time. Excuse me. Identify pressure points and barriers that get in the way of our self-care or kind of challenge that at times. Learn to confidently set boundaries that will aid in mental load management, and then ask questions regarding implementation of self-care practices. So as I said before, my name is Amanda Sargent, and I currently work as an outpatient therapist at Hiawatha in Winona. I also have an office in Caledonia, and I work in the Wabasha communities with the birth of 5 population as well. I have a pretty balanced caseload, currently consisting of adults, children, and families. However, as I noted, I really like the birth of 5 population just because of the emphasis on development and families. It's kind of my cup of tea. Prior to my current position, I worked for the agency as a children's mental health case manager, where I helped connect family and children and families to local resources and services. Paired with my background as a previous program director for a residential facility, this experience allowed me to develop a really social work-esque, if you will, approach, and that translated very nicely to my therapeutic approach over time. I graduated with my Master's of Science in mental health counseling from Viterbo University in December of last year, and I'm currently working on my Minnesota licensure. I'm about halfway there, so very excited to be wrapping that up soon. So who here is a parent or caregiver of some kind? Could be caring for one of their parents or a neighbor. It's not uncommon for me to hear, I feel selfish taking care of me, or I don't have time. If I take care of myself, I don't have time to take care of everybody else. And this often comes from the parents that I work with. Just a general PSA for you all. Taking care of yourself is not a selfish thing. It's a necessary thing. As humans, we're not meant to work all the time. Our body naturally needs time to rest and recharge and to be able to give things our all. Taking care of myself doesn't mean me first. It means me too. It means I deserve to slow down and be cared for. My needs matter too. So keep that in mind throughout this presentation. Now I want you to think of your brain as a battery, like a cell phone or computer. It's a powerful piece of equipment, but it needs to be plugged in and charged from time to time to continue to work well. Your brain's no different. In order to work at its most efficient capacity, we need to turn off and recharge. Taking breaks from work to relax, engaging in preferred tasks, sleeping, and eating right are all great ways to do this on a very small level. The three most common things I see in agency referral forms are stress, anxiety, and depression concerns. Nationwide, anxiety and depression are diagnosed in 1 in every 5 people. It's likely you or someone you know have experienced bouts with this trio and might even be experiencing an influx now due to COVID-related factors. Compassion fatigue is also increased because times are tough. Compassion fatigue is the mental exhaustion and emotional withdrawal experienced by those who care for others over an extended period of time. And it can really lead to some devastating consequences for our own mental health and even potentially our social relationships. This is why taking care of yourself is so critical, because it's not possible to connect to others with a dead battery. By practicing self-care regularly, we can build up our resilience by developing new positive coping skills that make it a little easier to recharge each day. So as you can see, there are a handful of different self-care domains that break down what makes us feel charged or balanced. The physical domain is pretty self-explanatory, and it's often what people think of when they think of self-care because these care-related tasks are very visible and tangible. They're most likely what you hear from the doctor when you go and talk about health things. For example, it could be walking, getting good sleep, eating well, exercise in general, those more physical things. The emotional domain is a bit more complex and includes more internalized skill like stress management, emotional maturity, ability to forgive and move on or show consideration of others. It's kind of the stuff that we develop based on experiences throughout our life up until this point. And while important, these skills are often influenced by more complex dynamics, such as trauma in childhood or negative interactions with others that kind of leave a bad taste in your mouth for future interactions. So some things that are a little more complex that we might have to work through, but definitely still need to be checked in on. Socially, we can take care of ourselves by setting healthy boundaries with others, including our support systems, engaging with others positively online, and focusing on communication, amongst other things. Spiritual domain can be tapped into by spending time alone, meditating, connecting with a higher power, or other creative expressions. On the personal level of self-care, this is where we spend time doing things that we're interested in, reflecting on our personal identity or honoring our true selves. Space domain is also of consideration. This includes things like addressing safety or toxic or healthy living environments. Are you able to work in your space so that you feel balanced, not overwhelmed? Do you like where you work? Are coworkers around you affecting your ability to cope? And I say coworkers loosely because as of right now, a lot of us are at home. So we've got kids or animals and pets and partners kind of around you that definitely can affect some of the space. Financially, we care for ourselves by planning for the future, saving, budgeting, paying bills, and even splurging now and then, just to kind of take care of that other parts. One of the most important types of self-care, in my opinion, is the work domain. And this is one thing that we're going to hit on a couple of different points throughout this presentation. So really highlight this here. This refers to time management, setting work-home boundaries, contributing to positive workplace attitudes, and taking breaks when you're entitled to them. Seriously, the work will wait. Take the break. Your body really needs it. Now, it can be kind of confusing sometimes what self-care is and isn't because people have varying opinions about this. I often hear people say self-care is going to the spa or going to get your nails done and having a day where you just treat yourself. It can be. Ultimately, here's what it is and isn't. Self-care is accepting help from others, but it's not trying to impress others by overextending yourself to please them. It's taking time to rest and relax, not mindlessly zoning out to reality TV shows, then sleeping in too late because you stayed up. It can be dressing in a way that makes you feel good, not engaging in retail therapy without considering your budget. It's allowing yourself to have that occasional ice cream cone or second cupcake, but it's not mindlessly snacking on foods that will make you feel worse, mentally and physically. It's about scheduling time for exercise or for things important to you, but not pushing yourself past your limits for the sake of physical appearance. It could be making social dates with friends or setting aside time to call every week rather than going out all the time at the expense of things important to you. Finally, it's setting healthy boundaries with friends, family, and coworkers and not retreating from social relationships or isolating yourself. Now, work-life balance is individualized to everyone because everyone has different stress thresholds and different life considerations, other things that they need to take care of. My biggest tip here is don't try and be all things to all people. Focus on your strengths and outsource the others. If you're not a whiz at accounts or graphic design, outsource them instead of wasting time. Ask a coworker to take it on, or in the case of teaching children from home or working with a partner, ask a teacher or partner parent to tag in for help. Are you a morning person? If you are, assign tough, high concentration tasks to the morning. Don't leave the tough tasks until it's nighttime and vice versa. If you're a night owl, build up your task completion throughout the day and kind of flip that. It'll actually work quite well for you. You may have a to-do list with 50 tasks on it. So you need to prioritize those tasks into 4 categories. These are on your screen here. They're urgent and important, important but not urgent, urgent but not important, and neither urgent nor important. And then write these down and plan your attack. What things should you probably focus on first? What things can wait until kind of clean up in the afternoon or maybe even tomorrow? Start planning that out and write it down in your schedule. Commit to that time. When personal issues arise, it can be tempted to bury yourself in your work to avoid feeling it. Don't do that. Someone once told me if you don't make time for your wellness, you will be forced to make time for your illness. And this goes for both physical and mental or emotional concerns. Plan to take time off to do nothing as needed. As a therapist, I deal with a lot of really heavy things some days, days in and days out. So I take a day off every other month and just do nothing. I sit at home, I hang out with my pets, and I just have a day for me, letting the day kind of decide how to fill itself. And I find that that's really nice because there's no other commitments. My partner's at work, all my friends are at work, no one's needing anything from me. It's just time for myself. And it's really done wonders for self-care. Continuing here, set work hours for yourself and do everything in your power to stick to them. Otherwise, before you know it, you'll be working on paperwork until midnight every night. And this includes actually taking your breaks, like I mentioned before, and not working through them. You owe yourself that 15 to 30 minutes to, just sit in quiet and put a sandwich in your face or do whatever you got to do. Finally, check in on one of those self-care domains that we mentioned a couple slides ago, once per day. If you stick to this over time, you'll notice you start feeling more balanced and balanced, and it becomes much easier to maintain. Setting boundaries is sometimes easier said than done. However, it's really important in your overall stress management. When setting boundaries with your workplace, it's important to leave work at work. Now, it may be tough to do that if you're working at home right now, so think of it as leaving it inside your home office, if that pertains to you. This means stop checking emails after you're done. Turn off your email notifications, work laptop, or work phones after you've hit your daily hours. 9 times out of 10, it can wait until tomorrow. Also, make sure you never work for free, such as working over your 40 hours, even though you don't get paid for it, or not using vacation time before it expires. Use it. You've worked so hard for it already. Use it. The last one is one that has been particularly difficult for me and other people pleasers alike, learning to say no. Personally, I struggle with this because I want to be helpful to others. However, I found quickly after graduation that I was taking on way too many new clients or new projects, and I got really overwhelmed. Then I felt really bad because I felt that people could no longer rely on me, or I wasn't doing my due diligence in my job. I'm still figuring out how to manage this effectively all the time, but I've learned that there's no shame in saying no. No one thinks I'm a failure or unhelpful or reliable because I understand what I'm capable of completing. While it might be uncomfortable setting that boundary at first, no can really be quite liberating, and it relieves a lot of pressure off your back. The mental load is a term for the invisible labor involved in managing a household and family, which typically falls on women's shoulders in our society. Also sometimes referred to as worry work or cognitive labor, the mental load is not about the physical task, but rather the overseeing or the management of these tasks. It's being the one in charge of having the never-ending list of to-do items constantly running in your head, or remembering what needs to get done and when, delegating all the tasks to respective family members, and then following up and making sure that they actually get done. The American Sociological Review describes it as a responsibility of anticipating needs, identifying options for filling them, making decisions, and monitoring process. If there's anything I've learned about this mental load, is that it's often taken for granted. If there are people in the household that are not managing the mental load, they often don't really understand that it's there. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up in this presentation today, is just bring some awareness to this, that it's not always just the tasks, it's the management and the coordination and all of the things that we think outside of those tasks. Sharing the load might be helpful, but it's not always the direct solution to the problem. We don't just need help with accomplishing each and every chore around the house. We also need relief from being the one in charge of knowing what needs to be done and from the responsibility of making sure others are doing their part. Sharing the load refers to joining with our partners or teammates instead of just getting it done. So I'm going to share this little comic with you as well to hopefully give some context behind this and open some conversation about how this might be experienced in your own households. So the comic is called You Should Have Asked. It's by a blogger that goes by Emma. So you should have asked. Back when I was in my first job, a colleague invited me over for dinner. When I got there, she was trying to feed her kids while preparing our meal. Have a seat, grab a drink, I'll be right there. Okay. Notice she's cleaning up and taking care of things.
So Amanda, to pause you, are you showing, I'm not seeing the comic. I don't know if others aren't either.
Oh, you're not. Okay. Maybe I'll just put it in the link then, because yeah, I'm scrolling through it right now, and if you can't see it on my screen.
One thing you can try, I had this exact issue last night.
Yeah.
So if you reshare and choose desktop instead of your window, somebody coached me through this last night.
Ah, okay, hold on here.
And then it shows all of your windows. I think it might have been Eileen, actually.
Got it. Is it now? Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So I'll back up then. Thank you for flagging me on that, Brian. So it's called You Should Have Asked. I was in my first job, a colleague invited me over for dinner. When I got there, she was trying to feed her kids while preparing our meal. Have a seat, grab a drink, I'll be right there. Okay. Come on, sweetie, make an effort. After a while, the pot started to overflow. And everything spilled onto the floor. Husband comes in, what a disaster, what did you do? What do you mean, what did I do? I did everything, that's what I did. But you should have asked, I would have helped. It's a scene that must seem familiar to many new parents, and I thought it said a lot about how things get organized at that stage in our lives. Now, I want to preface before I get into this, because this can be very, how do I put this? Channeled at men, and it's not always the case. Sometimes men in each family unit is the head of the household and doing some of these mental load tasks. So I just want to preface that when it says a man expects his partner to do him, it's not always a man. But when a man expects his partner to ask him to do things, he's viewing her as the manager of household chores. So it's up to her to know what needs to be done and when. The problem with that is the planning and organizing things is already a full-time job. At work, once I started managing projects, I quickly stopped participating in them. I didn't have time. So when I ask women to take on the task of organization and at the same time to execute a large portion, in the end, it represents 75% of the work. Didn't do the dishes. Well, you never asked. So feminists call this work the mental load. Mental load means always having to remember. Remembering that you have to add cotton buds to the shopping list. Remember that today's the deadline to order your vegetable delivery for the week. Remember that we should have paid the caretaker for last month's work by now. All of these things come together. All of these little don't forgets in the back of your head. It's almost completely borne by women in our society, and it's permanent and exhausting work. It's also invisible. So while heterosexual men I know say that they do their fair share of household chores, sometimes their partners might have a different perspective. So I'm not going to beat this comic to death. I think you guys kind of get the point here. I'm going to stop sharing the screen and go back to my presentation now. Sorry for the tech stuff. All right. Okay. Can you guys see my presentation? Not yet. All right. And we're back. Okay. All right. So I wanted to bring this up because I'm finding in a lot of my family sessions that this problem runs deeper than just issues at home or sharing household chores or whatnot. So I wanted to bring it to the general population just to have this conversation at home. What does the mental load look like within your own individual households, and how is that contributing to stress overall and trying to manage other things like work responsibilities that also come in at that time? So what are some of the mental, emotional, or otherwise invisible tasks that you're in charge of in your house? Are you the one responsible for planning weekends or trips, delegating all the chores, all this stuff? Does this stuff sound close to home? If so, it might be worth addressing sharing the mental load with your partner. So I laid out some steps here if that speaks to you and how you might go about this conversation. You might share the original comic and get their feedback on it. What are your thoughts? Do you think this is applicable to our relationship, or is this just a silly feminist comic online? Then offer some concrete examples of what the mental load looks like or feels like in your life. What are some of the tasks that you're responsible for that go deeper than surface level? Explain what you want to share. Explain that you want to share the management, not just the tasks themselves. So something like this. I feel really uncomfortable delegating all of these activities. It's a big job to be the manager, and I'd rather we just look at what needs to be done and decide how to divide it up together. Then I won't feel like I'm nagging everyone all the time. Won't feel so exhaustive. What do you think? Include planning and management tasks when you divide up that housework. So if someone's in charge of the grocery list for the week, make sure that they're the ones looking through the fridge to figure out what we have to get still, or going to get the groceries and helping them pack them when they come back. It is still a team. By no means am I saying you have to delegate all responsibilities, but open up that communication and understand that it goes deeper than just the physical task. Then trust your partner to get things done. One thing that I've noticed I have a very bad habit of is, because I manage the mental load primarily in my house, I'm always asking my partner, did you go to the post office? Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you remember about this? Nope. He's grown. He can do it. Trust that he's going to take care of it. And then check in with each other. Rather than asking things like, did you do this? Ask, oh, did you have any troubles with whatever? Or how might I be able to help next time or make this easier for you? And you just kind of communicate back and forth. This quote, sometimes I'm unsure if I'm working from home or living at work. Can't really see you guys right now, but I wonder if this resonates with anybody. I once had a colleague say this to me. Does it ring true for everyone else? It's almost like the line between home and work has fizzled out. So that brings us to our next point. We've been dealing with this, working and teaching for some of us from home for about 8 months now and counting. I've gathered some of the most helpful tips I've shared with parents navigating the sticky spot between work from home employee, parent, and teacher. First, try to create a daily schedule that works with your child's, and if at all possible. This means structuring the day around when you have important meetings, natural learning or food breaks, and prioritizing harder tasks in the morning. It's also helpful to know who's in your child's class, contact information for teachers, and who you can access for extra help should you need it. Other parents can be great resources for this as well. I found it helpful to imagine children's job as school and play into it. So for example, creating a morning routine where they're having breakfast, you're having your coffee, and you're talking about the meetings for the day, or discussing take-home pay or otherwise incentives, like what can they earn after doing their work as expected. And then when they can expect to have their paid 15 break. Get creative, use incentives, and then base that on what motivates your child. Finally, tag team when necessary. I recognize that this isn't always conducive for all parents, but know your strengths and weaknesses, and then be honest with yourself. If math is not your strong suit, negotiate a deal with your partner to divide up the workload. Identifying your pressure points is a crucial step in building awareness and capacity for self-care. Pressure points are potential stressors that can cause anxiety and stress in our lives. They can be work or school related, such as meeting deadlines, dealing with coworker conflict, threats to job security, fear of inadequacy or failure, and adapting to unanticipated changes that we don't have control over. Work or school related pressure points can also spill over into other areas, such as romantic or family relationships if they're not managed appropriately. However, relationships and families can also be a pressure point. Things like divorce or separation, intimacy concerns, child rearing, parenting practices, and teenage upheaval can all affect the dynamic drastically. I want you to think of the family unit like a Swiss watch. In a Swiss watch, each piece has a specific job or role that affects all of the other pieces. When one piece is broken, the watch stops working. The dynamic's off. Families are similar in that one person's functioning can affect other people's in the unit. Pressure points can also be environmentally related. This happens when daily routine is bombarded by changes that are difficult to control or cope with. A prime example of this would be COVID and the adjustments we've had to make thus far to reduce risk. It could also be something like noise pollution, the weather, relocating to a new job or home, or being forced to adopt a new lifestyle. Psychological pressure points can include real and imagined fear and anxieties. For example, sleeplessness and constant worries are sometimes caused by unrealistic fears, and this can be affected by our subconscious minds, belief systems, cultural background, and social activity. Symptoms of mental health disorders or disorders in the family can also be present in this mix. Financial stressors are the most common pressure point on this list. There's a general belief that economic well-being is connected to the success in other life areas, meaning that this pressure point too can have powerful spillover effects. Lastly, we have health-related pressure points, especially right now. Health-related pressure points can manifest as somatic symptoms such as headaches, nausea, sleeplessness, and digestion concerns, amongst others. They can also be sources of stress, from common illnesses like influenza or seasonal allergies to more severe diagnoses like cancer, COVID, or a heart condition. Depending on each individual person, this area can really vary widely. So why am I telling you all these different things, breaking them down? Well, I want you to take a moment now and grab a piece of paper and a pen or something to write with, and then draw a circle like this one on your screen. It doesn't have to be colored in, just make all of the little domains, 6 parts. Then I want you to give each section a pressure point and imagine the center as 0, like indicated on here, and the edge of the circle in each domain is 10. So where would you put your pressure point? Then when you're finished, I want you to connect all of those dots. So it's going to look something kind of like this when you're finished. So take a couple minutes. I'll give you just 3 minutes or so, probably not even, and just think about it. Work-related stress, where would you put that on a scale from 1 to 10, or from 0 to 10, technically? Family or relationship related, environment related, psychological, financial, health related. Check in with yourself. Give you just a couple more seconds to finish up. All right, so if you're participating in this, your image should look something like this. I mean, it might not be exact. Obviously, it'll be based on your own stressors, but should have a new shape kind of in the middle like this. And this shape gives you a visual as to which areas of your life that you're experiencing the most stress right now, or have the potential for the most stress. As you can see, my 3 highest area, these are my actual data, is financial, environmental, work-related, and psychological stress. So they're kind of up there right now. It's got a lot going on with transitions for me personally right now. So things are a little out of whack, and that's okay. This tells me I need to focus on these areas to balance better. They require more attention right now. This graphic, although it's dynamic, it should change over time as I address these issues, as well as the mindset that often comes with them. So think to yourself, looking at your own answers to this, and ask yourself, what are these causes? Many of mine can be due to situational distress. I just bought a house. Financially, that's a lot. Environmentally, that's a lot. Psychologically, there's a lot of different things to adapt to. So all of those are high for me right now. I also recognize that very soon that won't be as big of an issue. So those are kind of checked. But what about you? What can you do to address some of these issues, or maybe bring that number down just a little? What about things that we can't control though? For example, health. I can't control if I contract COVID or another illness. Well, I can't change something. Obviously, I can try to wear a mask and use hand sanitizer and do all those things to try to prevent it. But ultimately, if I can't change it, I've got to change the way I think about it. So as I noted in a previous slide, a few back now, self-care doesn't have to cost any money. Many things that you can do for self-care are free. Going to the nail salon for self-care is great if that's what you like to do, but there's so many other ways to meet this psychological need than to whip out your credit card. Lack of time is one of the most common reasons people struggle with self-care. Between all of one's commitments and expectations, it can be difficult. Hold on to this thought. In a couple of slides, we'll talk about this in some ways that you can implement self-care into your daily routine without it messing up your schedule. Additionally, the needs of others can get in the way of our self-care. I'm sure many of you are parents or have little ones at home that rely on you for their care, or parents of your own that you're caring for. Or maybe your team at work relies on you to complete your work so that they can complete theirs. While the needs of others is important to consider always, it's okay to ask for help and set boundaries with these individuals. Let's go back to that boundary slot. Even your kids, of course, like if there's safety stuff, you use your head, but you can set boundaries. You can ask them, yes, wait until I'm finished with this, or work out another compromise. Some days you just don't have motivation. It's difficult to get started or to keep moving. When this happens, I want you to write out what made you start in the first place. What are your goals from here? How far have you come? How can you get there? Maybe even create a pump up playlist to help you get moving. I do this every Monday morning. Works like a charm. If this doesn't work for me, I often fall back to the idea that if I'm sick of starting over now, I have to have the courage not to quit now. Or maybe you just aren't ready for accepting change. Change can be hard and it takes a lot of effort to adapt to. Maybe you feel more comfortable not changing because it's predictable and familiar, therefore no surprises. However, in order to grow in life, we must embrace change. It's all part of it. Evolve or die. So as promised, here's a list of a few ideas to practice self-care in 15 minutes or less. You can fit one of these in on your break at work, in between client sessions, or just at the end or start of each day without having to adjust your schedule too much. So meditation, always one of my favorites, using a YouTube video or a recording. I've got different apps that can help with this as well. I personally recommend to start your morning with meditation because it really opens up your mind for the rest of the day, kind of clears things out, if you will. However, I have a lot of clients that like to use it at the end of the day to kind of shut things down and relax before bed. Either way, whatever works for you, I just suggest you try it. Going for a walk outside or any exercise outside whatsoever. So there's a lot of science behind it, but vitamin D, I mean, obviously we can only get it through the sun, or our skin can make it from the sun or through food. I don't know. But it helps a lot with some neurotransmitter production, specifically norepinephrine, serotonin, and dopamine. Call a friend, get in touch with social connections. I know it's hard right now to see friends all the time, but at least connecting over webcam or phone, let them know that you're thinking about them. Something physical, again, don't always have to go outside, but you can stretch or do jumping jacks or different yoga poses to help get your body moving. One of my personal favorites, especially in between client sessions, is to lay on the wall, or lay on the floor and put your feet up on the wall and imagine just a happy place. I often think of my parents' house in their backyard overlooking a ravine. It's just very peaceful. And I just kind of think of what it's like to be in that place. You can also think of other things, whatever makes you happy. Create a short playlist of uplifting songs and then listen to it whenever you need to, or journal, doodle, or do something ultimately to spark that creativity. Activate that right side of your brain. It actually will help solve problems and stuff too, on the left side. And if 15 minutes is still too tough to free up, here are a handful of things you can do in a minute or two that will help promote mindfulness and reduce tension. So say your affirmations. These can be like mantras. I work with a 12-year-old client who has an affirmation or a mantra every day that she says, I'm brave, I'm beautiful, and I can do anything I put my mind to. So when she's starting to feel anxious or she feels like crap starting the day out, that's what she repeats to herself over and over. And as she repeats that, she begins to believe it and kind of embodies that throughout her day. Recite a favorite verse from scripture, songs, or poetry. You ever have a quote from a song or a poem or even the scripture that sticks in your head as things kind of work out? So I can't really think of a great example, but a little piece of a song that's catchy and it just kind of brings your mood up a little bit. Think about that. List 3 things that you're grateful for and change them every time you do this. I often do this in the shower. I do some shower meditation where I reflect on things that I'm grateful throughout that day. Breathe deeply, slowly, and with long exhalations. So it's kind of gonna look goofy on a webcam, but I'll do it now. I'm gonna breathe deep and slow. You try to push out as much as you can on that exhale. Stand in the sunshine or rain. Like I mentioned before, there's a lot of really good natural benefits to that. I personally, it's a little weird, but I like the rain when it's nice and warm. It's refreshing. It kind of wakes you up and it feels a little liberating in some ways. Of course, drinking water. Make sure you're getting your 8 cups a day or whatever they recommend now. It's just one of those small things where, okay, a way of taking myself is simply taking a drink. This isn't water, but you get the point. Find 5 things that you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, and 2 things you can smell. Finally, 1 thing you can taste. So this one is a little more explanation needed, but looking around you, you're kind of doing like a grounding. I'm gonna find 5 things that I can see, and I'm gonna try really hard to be very descriptive and detailed about that. So I can see the lush green of my dwarf umbrella plant in the corner of my living room. I noticed that there's new growth on the side. It's starting to poke out. I mean, just focus on the details. The pot that it's in is very rough and rugged. I'll move to things you can touch. I can touch this coffee mug. It's very bumpy. I just notice how the bumps feel as I drag my thumbs and my fingers across it. Does it feel different if I put my hands here versus here? Just processing all through. Something that you can hear. Well, I hear the hum of my refrigerator behind me. It's pretty quiet. I mean, just get descriptive. And obviously I didn't go through 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, but I'm just giving one example throughout all things around me. Fill that in as you will. Just focus on those things. If your brain starts to drift back into, oh, I should be worried about that thing I got to do, or this thing I got to take care of, just bring it back. No shame. I'm going to find 2 more things. So as I mentioned, this is kind of a grounding technique. Grounding basically means to bring your focus to what's happening to you physically, either in your body or your surroundings, instead of being trapped by the thoughts in your mind that are causing you to feel anxious. So to help center yourself, you can also put your hands in a bowl of water. Focus on the water's temperature and how it feels on your fingertips, palms, back of your hands. Does it feel the same in each part of your hand? Use warm water first, then cold, then flip it. Does it feel different to switch from cold to water, or to cold to warm versus warm to cold? Do you have a favorite fragrance that calms you or helps you feel energized? This could be a candle, soap, tea, spice, perfume, anything. Inhale the fragrance slowly and deeply, and try to notice its qualities like spicy, sweet, sharp, citrusy. I'm doing this with my coffee. I can smell slight aromas of caramel or almost like a chocolate. You can also pick up or touch textured items around you. I'm going to use this mug all day today, I guess. As I noted, it's very textured. You can focus on how your hands feel different against the mug in different parts, or what it might feel like compared to another item on your desk. Are the things that you touch soft or hard? Are they bumpy? Are they smooth, warm or cool? Focus on all that. Focus on the texture, the color, all of it coming together. Challenge yourself to think of specific colors like crimson, burgundy, teal, rather than just blue or red. You can also savor a food or drink. Take small bites or sips of a food or beverage you enjoy, letting yourself fully taste each bite. Think about how it tastes and smells and the flavors that linger on your tongue and different spots of your tongue. There are also some mentally grounding exercises you can try, including imagery. Picture yourself gathering all of these intense emotions and balling them up, or putting them in a box, or walking, swimming, jumping, biking, whatever, away from these painful feelings. Imagine your thoughts as a song or a TV show that you dislike, and you're changing the channel, or you're turning down the volume. They're still there. You don't have to listen to them or watch them. Just change the channel. One thing I've learned as a therapist is you always have to explain to people what's in it for them. What are they going to get out of this? So what are you going to get out of prioritizing self-care? Well, research has demonstrated people that regularly engage in self-care practices have all of the above on your screen. They're more secure financially. It enhances their sense of self and well-being, builds awareness of personal boundaries, and allows us to stick to those a little easier without feeling so guilty about it. It creates a joy and a richness with our own children, being more comfortable with ourselves, being more flexible in personal connections, ultimately creates more balance, which equals more life harmony. It also has been shown to affect an increased tolerance of others, have a less need for recognition, be more realistic in goal setting, better at letting things go and emotional regulation, as well as resiliency and increased confidence. So, I mean, while this stuff seems sometimes very surface level, if we actually dedicate the time out of our weeks or our days, even if it's a minute or 15 minutes at a time, all of these things will slowly kind of start aligning. And it'll be a lot easier for us to go get through the days. So ultimately, the main theme here is balance is not something you find, it's something you create. So I challenge you guys to take some time to reflect after this presentation and figure out what are some pressure points that you've identified, and what can you what can you do to start tweaking some of those or make them a little easier? And hopefully I've offered some ideas throughout all of these slides. But if you have any other questions or concerns or want more information, you can also reach out to me on this, but I'm going to stop my screen share here and then go to the chat now if there's any questions as well. All right. So that's about all I got. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't have a question, Amanda, just a comment. Thanks for doing this today. I think this is the second time I've seen it. But you know, I could probably see or hear you do it again tomorrow, and it's just crazy how constantly I think a lot of us need to be reminded of this. Because in our check-ins, a lot of in my group talked about how the joy that we're finding right now in life is being able to slow down and spend time with family that we otherwise, so physically we're maybe slowing down, but mentally we're just on overload. And you just reminded it's still important for ourselves to do things for ourselves. So it was good. Thank you.
Thanks. And it's one of those things where self-care, it seems so basic, right? Everyone knows, yeah, we got to take care of ourselves. That's a given, right? But it's so much more complex than that. I mean, there's so many different ways to do it. It's not always so obvious on how to take care of ourselves. Sometimes just filtering our thoughts or our actions, choosing our battles. Okay. Other thoughts?
I would just second what Eric shared too. I mean, I really appreciate the content in the presentation, and especially the breaking it into these kind of pieces we can navigate in our days, that it doesn't require having to step aside and step away or step above and beyond, but just sort of integrate it. And appreciate the remembering. It's you know, as Eric said, even on a multiple daily basis, just when I think I've got a handle on something that feels like self-care, there it goes drifting away. And it's like grabbing for this thread as it blows into the sky. So it's really grounding just to have that, have a presentation like that and that remembering. So thank you for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm really glad that you mentioned compassion fatigue. And I think you're talking to a group of people that experiences a lot of that, and who also, a lot of us lead colleagues who deal with compassion fatigue. And so these will provide great tools for us to bring back to our colleagues as well as use in our own personal lives. So I think now even more than most times, although our field is prone to needing these kind of reminders, I'm really glad you could be here today.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, I would like to thank all of you who joined us on the call today as well, and encourage you to reach out to Amanda if or as questions come up for you, especially if, well, no, especially, I'll just leave it at that. And I look forward to hearing everybody's responses to the leadership survey if they feel that there is an opportunity to expand your connection with the Alliance. So look for some follow-up from the team. And in the meantime, be safe and be well. Brian, thank you for hosting us today.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the day.
Bye.